This is an 8-iron, and it's a dead shank.
Wow.
Way right.
Oh, takes a hop
shank.
off the path.
You gotta be kidding me. Very tough pitch shot right here. You gotta hit it into the hill, one hop up and bite, and it's in.
Kind of like that.
Well, I would like to welcome to the Sub 70 podcast noted golf club designer Mike Vrska. Mike, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us this evening, and appreciate you being on the podcast.
Oh, you're very welcome, Jason. Looking forward to it. Always happy to talk product and innovation and design, and hopefully we enlighten at least one person's mind with the conversation.
Well, speaking of projects, we don't have to go in details in case there's, clients that don't want it out there yet, but is there any projects you're currently working on that you're really excited about, and maybe you can share kind of the direction it's kind of going or what you're kind of seeing as you're going into 2019?
Yeah, there are some things I'm working on. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can talk about publicly in that regard, but, I think, when you're looking at big picture, I think we're getting into kind of a two-way path. It's, are you going high end? Are you really going innovation with, different materials and lots of things that cost money? Or are you doing something that's still really cool, but, a little more at a price point? And sometimes those, when people's hitting price point, that doesn't mean cheap. It just means, hey, I'm trying to hit a $8.99 set of irons or a $7.99 set of irons, rather than saying, hey, I'm going to throw the kitchen sink at this thing. I don't care if it's $1,399 or $1,500 or whatever the case may be. So, I think there's that clear delineation going on, and it's what's your goals. You can make great golf clubs both ways, and just to see what who your market is and what your brand can support, and take it from there.
Looking forward once again, kind of at 10,000 feet, what area of golf club design do you think has the most potential for improvement?
That's a great question, and I think I'm a glass half full kind of guy when it comes to it. I think all clubs can still be improved. For so many years, guys like me and other smart people in the industry, we'd say, boy, I wish we could do this, but we just can't afford it. With the rise of PXG specifically, and they're changing price points, and obviously the economy seems to be doing significantly better. Some of those reins have taken off. So some of the things that have been prototyped for, maybe you're prototyped 3, 4, even 5 years ago, but the answer is, boy, we can't afford it. You're going to start to see some of that stuff come out, start to see some of it improved. So I really think it's across the board. Now, drivers are still the most heavily regulated from a USGA perspective. So I think if you look long term, I think that's, and pun intended here, it's a little boxed in, but there's still plenty of room to innovate in drivers. I think there's tons of room, especially in fairway woods and hybrids, although the sales of hybrids seem to have taken a little step back in recent years. And there's great things in irons you can do. So if you look across the board, I think there's room to innovate everywhere. And it's just what you can do differently, what patents you can avoid, which is no small feat in the golf space. And again, what your brand can support from a marketing, from a tour, and who you want to talk to.
You may have answered this already, but in a reverse, is there one certain product or a couple of them that are the hardest to gain, incremental distance or improvement out of? Is there one product line as a designer that's the most difficult to work with when you are trying to, take this project and say, how do we take it to the next level?
Well, the faster the swing speed, the harder it is, period. So drivers are always the most difficult, just because there's so many things that can quote unquote go wrong. It's really hard to make a bad sounding 8-iron. It's really hard to make an 8-iron that is going to break. It's really hard, to make an 8-iron that, toe shots go significantly different than heel shots. So, the faster the swing speed, meaning drivers and then fairway woods and on down the line, just the more things that can go wrong. The more things go wrong, the more that you could have to have trade-offs. Boy, we want to raise the MOI, increase the MOI, make this more forgiving, but boy, I really want to lower the center of gravity or move it forward or move it back. But boy, I really want to thin out this area, but that creates some deflection in the crown or some deflection in the sole that has this negative effect on ball speed. So anytime you're talking drivers, anytime you're talking thin walls, anytime you're talking faster swing speeds, the more complicated it gets. No offense, there's some incredible putter designers. I'm friends with them. I'm pretty proud of some of the ones I've done over the years, but putters are the simplest. That doesn't mean they're easy. That doesn't mean you can't make a bad putter. But again, it's kind of tough to make a putter that breaks. And the USGA rules are much more open space, much fewer patents on putters than drivers. So all those things combine, again, the faster the swing speed, the more difficult it's going to be, both to differentiate yourself and to potentially have those trade-offs or negative influences you go through the design process.
If the USGA took the limit off, CT or how much the face would spring or the size limit, take a good player, 100-mile-an-hour club head speed, not tour player, but not somebody with 75-mile-an-hour club head speed. How much more if you were given unlimited, go as crazy as you wanted, how much more distance do you think a player with 100-mile-an-hour club head speed would gain if the reins were taken off, per se?
Well, I think there's a two-part answer to that. The answer is today, meaning, the next product cycle. Not as much as people think. Is there 5 to 10 yards out there? The answer is probably. But what would have to happen is manufacturing techniques would have to catch up. The ability to make different castings or millings, be able to control wall thicknesses that maybe people aren't worried about now. Because you still have a limited amount of weight. There's no USG rule on what the swing weight or the total weight can be, but it is a determining factor in how fast people can swing the golf club. So you can't just suddenly make something 700 cc's because again there's that mandated not by the USGA but just by physics and people's strengths and ability to swing the club head. What the weight can be, and obviously there's limits on wall thickness for durability. The bigger the head gets, then we get into some aerodynamic issues. So the answer right now is not as much as people think. That if the USGA said, hey, this is a free for all, now the golf ball is a different story. The golf ball could be significantly longer tomorrow. But from a driver perspective, again, maybe 5 to 10 yards in one product life cycle. But if you're talking, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, then I think the number could be significant again.
Current debate that's going on right now, if you're kind of on Twitter and watching it, I'm sure you see it as well, is, the touring pros are hitting the ball at an extremely long level, and the power game is taking over where you're a better player if you're longer. The stats are backing that up. Just as a golf club designer, what's your sort of thoughts on distance being the greatest factor, versus accuracy or, a little bit more of working the golf ball, a little bit more of a traditional pattern where my concern is, I don't know where you're at is, well, it's not a concern, it's already there, where you could not have a major championship at Chicago Golf Club, for example. Some of these classic courses are becoming, essentially for the top men players, irrelevant based on length. So would you like to see designs that would actually take some of that back and make the artistry or curvature of the golf ball a little bit more prevalent than just pure power, I guess is my question.
So the answer is no. I am on the fence for bifurcation. So I would be okay if the USGA tomorrow said, hey, or more importantly, the PGA of America would be more likely people to do this. Say we're going to have a set of rules for the best players in the world. I am not for rolling back equipment for the amateur player in any way, shape, or form. And quite frankly, I'm not really for it for rolling back for tour players. I love this great game. It's provided me a lot of fun over the years. It provides a living for a long time. So anything that makes this game less fun and harder, I am out on. I compare it to other games. You look at a player like LeBron James, who's, so big and so fast. And you look at somebody like John Havlicek or Jerry West. Back in the day, they couldn't have fathomed some of the, LeBron James playing basketball the way he does. And yet they're not talking about making the rims 12 feet. They're not talking about moving the floor out wider or doing other things. We just accept in basketball, wow, this is really cool that this happens. Somebody like, Randy Johnson back in the day throwing 100 miles an hour, he was a rarity. Now every pitcher they rolled out in the playoffs were throwing 100. Is that a bad thing? Scoring's down. Some people argue it is, but no one's saying, wow, we should make the ball bigger. We should do these other things. So I'm not sure why in our sport we do that. Yes, it is sad that the Chicago Golf Club couldn't hold a major, but I'm not sure every golf club needs to hold a major. It's a wonderful place. They just had the Women's Senior Open. It was wonderful on TV. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to go out and see it. Talked to some people who did, who never got to play the course, but got to see it firsthand in that venue. Again, just because Brooks Koepka is not out there bombing away doesn't mean it's not a great golf course. So, again, I am not for rolling the golf ball back. I'm not for rolling technology back for the amateur player. I would say if we want to have bifurcation and the PGA of America says, hey, this is what we want to do, the PGA Tour, not PGA of America, PGA Tour says this is what we want to do, I would support that. And the problem is what becomes then of all the marketing dollars that get spent on tour. What happens to their living? Would a Callaway, would a TaylorMade, would a Cobra be willing to pay the kind of dollars they pay now if those players were using completely different clubs? That's a difficult question to answer.
Over your career with the design work, how have you seen shafts change, both in steel and graphite? And then how do you look at the change potentially in a shaft, bringing that into your design work?
Sure. So it's amazing the consistency of graphite. I am a big believer and preacher of graphite. For a vast majority of players, I think a lot of amateurs, even better amateurs, have not given graphite iron shafts and the credit they deserve from a trying to try them and getting fit perspective. And having said that, True Temper and KBS do an amazing job. I'm big fans of both their products as well as the people who design them, the people who sell them, the people who work there. Two great companies doing great things. And they've really done a great job of, getting away from the, hey, here's your Dynamic Gold S400. Everybody should be playing this. They've really, gone out and say, hey, we're going to figure out different alloys, different thicknesses, different step patterns to give a 110 gram shaft with the right ball flight, to give a 90 or even an 80 gram steel shaft for those players who want that. So the from a steel perspective, I think from a technology, they've probably led the way. Now, graphite has really become amazingly consistent, and now they can fit so much better with launch monitors and all the other data that can be derived. And obviously, you can fine-tune graphite much more minutely because of the different layers and flags and orientation and varied materials. So as fitting becomes more and more and more prevalent, as we get more and more and more data, it's not around the corner, but there's going to be a day that you can truly get a golf shaft designed for you, where everything is perfectly aligned to how you deliver the club, your speed, your angle of attack, when you load it, how you load it. And it's not just going to be, hey, here's 10 shafts, these 3 fit you well, this one fits you best. It's we can design a shaft for you. Again, that's in the future. But I really think that is the future. If you look at Nike ID and what they do for shoes and other things, customization and personalization is going to win. It's exactly what you want. It's exactly what you need. It makes you perform best. So, again, I'm not sure this really answers the way you want, but I think both are doing an amazing job in different ways and for different reasons. But I still in the future consider graphite being the most likely winner whenever that time does come.
And then on the flip side, as a designer, are you ever amazed that Dynamic Gold, for example, has been around, I believe, late 70s, early 80s, and it's still one of the most popular shafts for better players on tour, high-level amateur? And are you amazed one product can stand the test of time for that long without it being obsolete, for lack of a better word, or something better coming along?
Yeah, it really is amazing, and kudos to all the guys at True Temper and what they've been able to do and keep that. They work hard on tour to keep those in the bag. Obviously, it is the standard. So even players today, somebody like Ricky Fowler, some of the young guys, they still pretty much grew up playing Dynamic Gold. The really interesting is going to see with the next generation who have played, so many more different options to see if it continues. Because again, even I'm in my mid-40s now. Back if you were a decent player back then, you played Dynamic Gold. Really, that was the only option. Now there is so many more options. All these kids in the HHGA are getting fit. They're on launch monitors all the time. They have the ability to try different things. So it really is going to see what happens, kind of 8 to 15 years from now. is that the big changeover in dynamic gold? Oh, I'm 100% confident will still be out there and be an important shaft on tour. Will it be a dominant shaft on tour? And I kind of doubt that, just because players are not going to be grooving. There's so many players are not going to be grooving their swings on that dynamic gold. That's what they felt from the first time they really got good, so to speak, in their early teens. That's all they played through high school and college. It's difficult to switch, but if you've tried other things and you don't know that dynamic gold feel, and boy, that's the only thing that feels good to you, then you're open to more things down the line. And obviously there's many more options now than people even my age, which I'd like to think is not old quite yet, got to experience growing up playing golf.
It's funny you say that because I cannot get out of dynamic gold. I'm 45 years old, right? Like every new set of irons we're building for ourselves here at our companies and whatnot, like I experiment with different stuff, and I have to go back to dynamic gold R300. Like it's just probably because I've played them since college golf. Like
yeah.
It's like they work. I know what the flight's going to do, but you think like, okay, in the next, I played these damn things for 20 some years. I think there's got to be something better down the road, but yet the flight of those things. So you might be right, I guess is what I'm saying, based on history, right? That's what I've used since I've played, Tommy Armour 845s back in the day. They had R300s in them, and they worked. So you might be right on that.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to two things. One, what I call the window. When you hit your 6-iron, you're going to look up and see, you expect the ball to be in a certain window. And obviously with dynamic gold, that's happened. And the other thing that is when I hit a shot really good, I know what it feels like with dynamic gold. So you take those two things, and it's tough to get people out of it. Cause if they look up, and even if the launch monitor is better, boy, that it's higher than I expected, or it's lower than I expected, or after it reaches its peak, it's spinning different, coming down more vertically, or
Yes.
A little flatter. If that doesn't look right, it's really tough to get out of if you're a better player. Again, if your goal is to break 120, that's a whole different story. But if you have played at even a halfway decent level, there are expectations when you look up, and it's comforting to see those looks. And dynamic gold delivers.
I think I'm one of those old souls who will probably have those things until I'm too old to play them. So it's interesting, though, of how some things move really fast in this industry, and some things are just, they're iconic technology that's still relevant. It's sort of interesting to analyze it in both directions, I think. So how some things aren't going to go away, and some things, there's new technologies popping up all the time in the same realm, same area of what's, in golf equipment, which I find fascinating. Over the last couple of years, without naming equipment, and I'm not going to have you do that, but is there some designs that you think really had some merit and are pretty darn revolutionary? And then from like a physics standpoint or the design, why did those designs or these trends work so well for most golfers? Or is there anything that comes to mind for you when I make a kind of broad statement like that?
Yeah, I think Callaway's gel brake technology, and I will call out some. I think they've done a wonderful job with that. To recognize, a couple fold. One, when the USGA changed the rule, and no one really talked about this, but it went from, hey, you've had to have passed the CT rule for 10, 15 years now, but technically they could go back before and also say, hey, you have to pass the COR rule. That was changed a few years ago. So they would never go back and use the old COR cannon, the old .83 that some people might remember was a big deal back in the late 90s and early 2000s. So when that rule changed, Callaway, I think, did a good thing and recognized there may be room to innovate and certainly play within the rules. 1,000% play within the rules. But maybe give just a little window that they could take advantage of before other people did. I think the jailbreak's a great technology. I really like some of the things that PXG's done. I'm not saying that they're all new, but I think they've taken some really cool things that have been recent and improved them. I thought they've done a nice job. I think Cobra's doing a really good job. The quality and breadth of ping products and what they've done from a CG perspective and MOI perspective on their drivers, while I'm not saying it's revolutionary. They've really done a great job of making a driver that'll fit, both tour players and people in general. TaylorMade always obviously makes good products. There's a lot of really good stuff out there, but there's a couple that have stood out to me.
Looking forward, do you see any new materials on the horizon that could change golf, sort of like what titanium did in the mid '90s, right, from steel, where you really saw those gains. Is there any? We've been using titaniums now for you're pushing 25 years essentially. Do you see anything else on the horizon, especially like in a driver, that could take it to the next level from a different material standpoint?
Well, there's talk of using magnesium many times, and there's been there are a couple of products over the years that tried it with crowns and some other things. I don't think. In fact, I'm going to go on a limb and say no. I don't. I think titanium is going to be here to stay, but I think that the difference is because of price points increasing, you're going to see more and more multi-material products where you can maximize the benefits of titanium while still maximizing other properties, lightweight, strength here, weight there, heavier or lighter. So I think titanium's here to stay, just as carbon steel and stainless steel have been literally the same in irons forever. Skipping over the unfortunate TI 1000 from Tommy Armour titanium irons. But titanium's here. I don't see anything taking it over. But I do see more and more multi-materials and some things that maybe people haven't seen in a golf club before starting to creep in as engineers and designers start to understand those benefits. And manufacturers understand how to make them, hold them together, and what have you. So you can dial in sound. There's all kinds of some cool things that I think will happen over the coming years from a multi-material perspective.
What was always, I've been around this for my whole life too, and the whole magnesium thing has always been interesting. But if you could, in a perfect world, make it work, why would magnesium be such a great material to use for a driver if you could sculpt it without having any of the problems that you can potentially have with magnesium?
Well, it's still lighter than titanium, right? And that's really what we're chasing. So anytime that you can get weight out of what I'm going to call a chassis, it's not really that, but try to have that term. If you think, boy, if I could minimize the weight, the absolute weight, just for the face and whatever I need to hold it together, and then I can take all that other discretionary weight and I can put it forward if I want to, or I can put it back, or I can put it heel toe, or I can put it wherever I want it, that's the win. As we talked about, the USGA doesn't really limit head weight, and there's drivers that are all different swing weights. There's no rules on that, but there is, again, just kind of rules of physics of what the average male, what the average female, even what a tour player can get moving fast enough in control. So there's this self-limiting factor, trying to maximize speed, but still have enough mass there to do things. So anytime you can get discretionary weight and say, boy, I've got 3 grams, I've got 5 grams, heaven forbid you find 10 grams somehow, that you can move around, then you can really affect mass properties. You really affect mass properties, then you really affect CG. Then you're getting into maximizing or at least changing, modifying launch and spin, which is ultimately all the golf ball cares about.
Hey everybody, this is Jay from Sub 70. Just wanted to give a quick update. The final touches are being made to our website. All of the equipment is in, and it looks like we should be able to start working with other golfers in the next couple of weeks here. Please feel free to contact us by social media at GolfSub70 if you have any questions. Otherwise, thanks for listening to the podcast, and back to the interview.
How did you find a pathway into becoming a professional golf club designer, and where did you grow up, and did you kind of fall in love with golf early, and sort of how did you wind up doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I've told this story several times. I'm happy to tell it again. So growing up, I was a pretty good little baseball player, and I got to play a little bit in college. But I happened to, my uncle, I had no one in my family who had ever played golf. Really no one I even knew had ever played golf. And I had an uncle who had a mandatory work function that he had to go play golf. It was no choice. So we went out and rented clubs and did his thing and just said, wow, this is so great. I think my nephew meeting me might like it. We went out to this tiny little par 3 course in LaPorte, Indiana. Again, rented clubs. It was a little 9-hole course. And I'll never forget, I teed up with a 3-wood. It's about 110 yards. I'm 12 years old at the time and a decent athlete, good baseball player for my age. And I tee it up and I make the biggest swing and I hit about, 9 or 10 inches behind the ball, big divot. My club head actually skips completely over the golf ball, and a whiff. I mean, literally make a big divot. The ball never moves off the tee. We all kind of laugh and step up again, make my second swing, and the ball never left the flagstick. It's one of the straightest shots I've ever hit in my life, as it went directly at the flagstick, over the flagstick, over the road behind the flagstick, and into the cornfield beyond. Now, I probably only hit it maybe 140 yards, but at that moment I realized this game is really cool. I want to be a part of it, and then just played as much as I could since then. Again, obviously being a better baseball player, I was a good golfer, but certainly not a collegiate level golfer. But played it, and then got through college and got an engineering degree and was working at U.S. Steel at the time. And thankfully, looking back, I got promoted into a job that just was really not a good fit. And I had worked there a number of years, and I was, young, newly married at the time, and just came home and talked to my wife and said, I really got to find something that I'm passionate about, that I really want to do. And so I sent out 63 emails, and I think the internet existed back then, but certainly not like it does now. So this was a lot of looking in the back of Golf Digest, Golf Magazine, Sporting News. I found 63 resumes to every baseball and golf manufacturer: shafts, grips, heads, baseball gloves, batting helmets, you name it, anything related to baseball and golf. So I thought, I just sent them an email, sent them a letter back in the good old days of real snail mail, saying, here's who I am, this is my history, here's my resume, I want to come design either baseball or golf, depending on who the company went to. And I got 3 responses. I got a response from Cleveland Golf, from Callaway Golf, and from Wilson Golf. Never even heard back from anybody from baseball. And I had interviews with all 3. All 3 went well. My wife happened to get pregnant. We didn't want to move away, so took the job at Wilson. That was about 20 years ago, and did 3 years at Wilson, and then 10 years at Adams Golf, which was just an unbelievably great time, and then 6 years as a global director of innovation at Wilson Golf before doing some other things the last 18 months or so. So that's how I got in. I love the story. It's just trying to be passionate and do something I loved, and it's worked out great.
What was your first, design that you did for one of the major OEMs that went into manufacturing, passed the sniff test, they're going to produce it, and how cool was it to see something that you designed out on a golf course that people were playing? What product was it, and what was that feeling like to actually see it from start to somebody, oh my God, they're playing my club?
Yeah, the very first one was a Pro Staff hybrid that I did, and it really was an amazing experience. So interestingly, over the years, seeing the clubs, that joy has kind of worn off. Not that it doesn't make me sad. It was like, oh, that's nice. But what has never worn off is seeing the reaction. I still love going out to demo days and testing and watching people hit the product I've been involved in and getting their reaction. It's still cool to see my stuff in stores. Don't get me wrong. That's still cool, but it's not as cool as just saying, and I'm making the world a better place. And I realize I'm not curing cancer here, but in some small way, I made the world a little bit better place. Because they're using their discretionary dollars, they're using their free time to enjoy a game that I happen to love, and get to see other people benefit from me and people I get to work with and team members, our talent, using our talent and skills to make their life just a little bit better, a little bit funner, a little bit, more use of their free time. So, getting to see those clubs was and is still great, but the joy on people's faces is even better to me.
So working for Adams and Wilson, kind of as a follow-up to this, let's just take Adams first, and it's all relative because it's of what period of time this was designed in. But what do you think your best design was for Adams Golf, and why was that club so good? And what I'm saying is, of course, 10 years later, the design could be surpassed. Yeah. But is there one at the time where this was revolutionary, it worked, and it was a stepping stone for next things that were coming down the line that still might be kind of influenced, your start influenced maybe a trend line that wasn't there beforehand, something to that extent? And I have a follow-up with the same question of what you did at Wilson, that you're still, same sort of thing that you did, like sort of what's your 2 best that you did?
So you mentioned 2, because there's 2 at Adams that stick out. I'm very proud of those, 10 of the best years of my life working with Chip Brewer, who's now CEO of Callaway and still stay in contact with, and Tim Reed, who now runs all their global tour operations. Just an incredible time, and many other incredible people there. But the two that stand out, my very first project, the first thing I did was the original Adams idea set. And that was revolutionary, but it was the first time that combined fully integrated hybrids and irons. Lots of people, shouldn't say that, not lots of people. There were hybrids in the marketplace. TaylorMade really kind of led that charge. But Adams and me and Tim Reed and especially, came up with this. We need to make these fully integrated, to take that buying decision out of, boy, is this the right 3 hybrid or 4 hybrid? Do I need a 5 iron? That original idea set, and we ordered a few thousand of those, and we thought we were, boy, I hope we can sell these. And it just took off, and the idea brand and everything about it was just such a big success, and really turned Adams from something that was doing okay at the time, still not doing great by any stretch of the imagination after, some of the tight lice 2 and other issues they had before new management came in, to really something that became what it was when TaylorMade bought it 10 or 11 years after that. So that, I'm still so proud of that. That such a simple patent, but really, birthed so many great products after that. And the other one, I don't think a lot of people will recognize this one, is just the Idea A7 set. And it was just, it was kind of a game improvement hybrid iron set, but it really became, a great combination that better players could play, as well as amateurs could play. Graham McDowell played that hybrid forever. In fact, for all I know, he still has one in the bag. But it was a club that got a lot of play on tour, and a lot of guys who were 12 handicaps went out on the weekend and just loved it. And there was no difference in the two clubs. No, we certainly had lots of prototypes and things on tour from Adams' hybrid perspective, but just that A7 was just, I think, a great bridge set from the amateur player to the professional, and everybody could enjoy it in a way that was both visually appealing, had the right MOI, had the right center of gravity. So I'm really proud of that in that regard as well. There's lots of other people who did amazing things there. I'm happy to have worked with. Certainly was not only me by any stretch, but I am proud to be there when it was only 4 people in R&D and getting that original idea set out there.
How much of your design work, once you have this concept, let's say like when you were back in the day when you work on the idea irons, how much of it has to be based on, robot testing and computer analysis versus golfers hitting the club and the feel of the club and the look of the club and the sound of it and their reaction to it? How do you put weight on each segment, or do you have to do a combination of both to get the most out of it?
You absolutely have to do a combination of both, in my opinion, to get the most out of it. I've made this, I don't even want to call it a joke anymore, but I've said this 1,000 times, and I'll probably say it 1,000 more. Robots don't buy golf clubs. And ultimately, we want to sell golf clubs, no matter who. If you're in the industry, that's the goal, is to sell golf clubs. Now, robots have an incredibly important process. It can deliver the club consistently over and over and over to get key data. If I want to line it up a half-inch toward with a 1 degree open face angle, what happens? Or, if I want to hit over and over a half-inch low on the face, what happens to the spin rate compared to the center of gravity? On a heel shot, what happens in relation to MOI? So I can start to plot what happens from a true launch and spin, repeatable launch and spin off the robot, to mass property effects I know in the head. Which is great. I can then understand what I'm trying to do, or what the team's trying to do from a design perspective. Does it do what we want? Does it do what we expect? Boy, we designed this to spin this much and launch this high. It's doing it, great. Or, boy, it's not doing it. Why? What's changed? What do we need to understand and go back to the drawing board? But it has to have player testing. Only players will tell you if it sounds right. Only players can tell you if it, quote unquote, feels right. I'm a big believer in testing irons with better players and understanding turf interaction. There's no robot who's, grinding it through the turf. They're hitting it off a tee. So having a tour player going through and hitting it off of hard pan in Arizona and then something lush in Florida and telling you what they like and don't like, that's feedback you can't get any other way. And so there's lots of things that go along with that, especially when you're doing the final iteration with understanding, hey, what's the stock shaft that we want to offer them this? Is this truly an S-flex? You can put the letter S on any graphite shaft or even any steel shaft out there you want. but does this fit the player profile for a stiff or for a regular that we want to sell to? So again, robot testing is critical, but ultimately it's got to win in a player's hands to be successful.
As you've kind of, gone through your career and come up with these designs and ideas, is there, and we kind of touched on it maybe a little bit with the materials here, but is there a design that you kind of have in your head? You don't have to give away your complete trade secret here, but is there something that you're kind of waiting for to have the material or something feasible that could be really interesting in, if you want to answer it, in a general idea? In other words, do you have this concept in 5 to 10 years of, if only then I could then do X and it would be amazing?
So this is probably going to be disappointing. The answer to that's no. I have plenty of things in my head that have not, or on scratch pieces of paper and notebooks that have not seen the light of day. But they're for a number of reasons. Maybe it wasn't the right brand. Maybe it wasn't the right time. Certainly there could be some durability issues, but I wouldn't say it's anything like, boy, if we just had, unobtainium or some other made up material, we could do this. Certainly there's things that I think we're closer to doing, saying, boy, I look at the thickness that we can do with titanium and some of the things you can do even with steels now, and we just support it with foams and rubbers and other things that we couldn't do, 5-8 years ago. So yeah, there's some of that, but there isn't one, grand golden egg sitting there that I need pixie dust and unicorn horn to make. But there are certainly things that are on the cusp that I think we're close to being able to do at some point.
On the flip side, have you ever had a great design concept? You go through the prototyping, you think this is going to be the next greatest thing, you're pushing the limits, and it doesn't work? Because I imagine that has to happen at some point when you're pushing the limits, right? When you're
often.
Right. So is there a classic
Often.
story where you've never been more confident and then you're like, oh my God, I can't get this to work, even though it sounded great on the front end? Has there been an epic fail, which comes with engineering, correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple, and again, this kind of goes back to, I think, your very first question. They're almost all hollow golf clubs, meaning a driver, fairway, or hybrid, because that's when the epic fails happen. When you make 3 swings and the club explodes on the third impact.
Right.
And that's happened numerous times because we are pushing it and understanding. And FEA analysis is great to say, hey, I think we can thin this wall out to this, and you run the iteration of it. And you get it close, but you're not always right. And, I'm a big believer in, the digital pre-testing, so to speak, before you make a physical part, and understanding rapid prototyping and all the things that go along with that. But there's still, when you're truly pushing it, there's literally things that explode on a golf club. But again, if it's hollow, that's what happens. So yeah, I've had drivers that pulled the first prototype out of the box and was super excited about it and lasted exactly 3 hits. So, yeah, that's disappointing. The good news is the second one we pulled out of the box, I think, lasted 12. So we were trending up, but still a long way from freedom, so to speak.
Yeah, but you have to do it, right? I mean, that comes with being an engineer. It comes with, how do you get it to the next level if you're not willing to accept failure and learn from it, right? I mean, that just comes with the territory of what you're doing.
Yeah, you're spot on. And there's a phrase I like. It's called fail fast. The faster that you figure out how to fail, then you go, okay, we can't do that. But, and that but becomes so important. But we learn this. Boy, this part failed, but that part worked that we weren't sure of. So, yeah, getting the parts made, having them hit, as fast as possible, churning through prototypes, is critical to learning, and it's critical to making great product. If every product out of the box works, I think you'd be awfully safe and not innovating properly or optimally.
Let's talk about wedges real quick. I'm fascinated by wedges. I don't know, it's something about the look of it, how they function, why they work. Do you have any, in your mind, general principles about what makes a really good wedge, and what are you most excited about that you've seen over, say, like the last 10 years of improvements in wedges, and how do you think they've gotten better? So it's sort of a two-parter here.
Yeah, so wedges I think are a lot like putters, and hopefully I'm not doing a freak about when I say this, but some of it's sex appeal, if you will. Guys just, boy, I love wedges, and I love the shape of maybe a classic Cleveland 588 wedge. or, boy, I love the teardrop shape of a Vokey. So, part of it is just that visual, putting it down and go, this looks like it should look behind the ball. Back when Nick Faldo played, he played these Mizuno wedges, and again, he was number one player in the world for a long time, and won Masters and British Opens, and just an amazing player. Excuse me, U.S. Opens, just an amazing player. And he had these really offset wedges that no one else liked. And I think back in those, and here's the best player in the world who loved these wedges. So most people put them down and they boy, I could never play this. And yet the best player in the world played the best with these. So part of it is that look, when you set it down, boy, this is what looks right to me. Now, having said that, then the real magic comes. And to me, the real magic is two things. It's the sole design, the combination of bounce, camber, sole width, those three specifically, and then two, the face treatment. When I say face treatment, I'm talking about the grooves. How close to the USJ limits are there? Is there a face roughness, meaning maybe it's a milling, maybe it's a laser etching, maybe it's something else to increase the friction between the golf ball and the club face to generate spin. And spin is really about control, to help you control the ball, can help you control the ball better from less than perfect lies. From the middle of the fairway, there's not that much of a difference, quite frankly, between the different grooves configurations out there, because they're all reasonably close to the USGA. The average player, if they hit 10 shots, is not going to see a big difference, but they can and do see a big difference out of bunkers, out of rough, out of wet conditions. So, a wedge design to me is really three things. One is the shape fit your eye, and take the brand out of play, different things for different people. And then from a physics standpoint, the face, what's going on with the grooves, what's going on with the face treatment, and then the sole, getting the right combination for your playing style, for how you want it to feel coming through the turf, where you play, and all the things that go along with it.
The last one I have here for you, what are you kind of most excited about, say, over the next, and I know we talked about this a little bit as well, but just next 5 or 10 years, what are you most excited about in golf club design that you're going to be working on?
And I think we've touched on these. I think the ability, and I hate to harp on it because, so many people, golf is not cheap, right? And I want to be as inclusive as possible and have as many people as possible. But raising price points and having more money to spend on design is going to help golfers who can afford it. And eventually it will help everybody, because when you make that technology, the more you make it, the cheaper it becomes, the more it can filter into other clubs. But, the ability to use different materials, the ability to thin things out and support faces, the ability to move weights around, both allowing the player to do it individually from a movable weight perspective, all of those things are really going to matter. And it comes down to being able to spend the money. A 299 driver, you can only do so much. A 499 driver, you can do a lot more. And obviously there's some people who are even pushing price points beyond that. So that freedom that the golf industry and the economy is now allowing is going to be critical to innovation. It's going to be critical to all players. And again, maybe some of you listening go, boy, I can't afford, brand X or brand Y right now. Sadly, that's true. But the good news is, in just a few years, those technologies are going to trickle down, and you're going to be able to see them in your clubs as well. So I think that's really exciting. I think what's happening with fitting, I think is amazing. I mentioned earlier, I got to play a little baseball back in my day and still follow baseball very closely. And it's amazing what Major League Baseball teams are doing with data now. And, launch monitors are incredible. Things that people like Foresight and other guys are doing out there. But I don't think we've always got into the deep dives of truly looking at the data. It's more about, hey, I want to hit, for the next 2 hours, I'm going to look at player X and try to get him the right shaft and the right loft, which is wonderful. It's so much better than it was even 5 years ago. But I think the next frontier is some of these really deep dives into data with things like Arcos and Blast Golf, and when you're getting data from hundreds of thousands of rounds of golf. And we're already starting to see it with virtual caddies and some of those other things, which will help people play better from a club perspective. Wouldn't it be great to get 1 million data points on a 4 hybrid, and what, different handicaps, different skill levels, different swing speeds, and be able to take all of that data and help design better golf clubs, help design better sets to understand how to optimize the 14 clubs that you're allowed to have in the bag. So I think big data is going to be a big deal in golf. And, the bigger companies who have analysts and statisticians and analytics groups are going to be able to key off of that sooner than a lot of people think. I don't think there's anything out tomorrow on that, but I think that's a big frontier that we're already seeing in other sports. And that's because they're backed by teams. The Chicago Cubs will spend all of that money, a couple 100,000, if not millions, on their analytics group. Somebody like Jordan Spieth is not going to spend millions of dollars on his analytics group, but does Titleist do that someday to really gather that data? Somebody like Arcos, who has the data inherently, do they do that? And then how does that get dispersed to club manufacturers, club designers? So it's a cool time, and data wins and innovation wins, and I think they're going to collide in a very good way in the near future.
Well, thank you so much for your time this evening. Greatly appreciate it. Loved the conversation, and best of luck of what you're working on, and we'll look forward to seeing those designs out there.
Thanks so much, Jason. Really do appreciate it.